For the longest time, it was thought and believed that the Detroit Lions were never ever going to figure out how to become a winning program. But with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, they finally have figured out the secret formula to defy all odds. And we're going to talk about it in this segment, folks. Stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are? And what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, all Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So, in today's episode, I am going to be talking about what I truly believe is the Lions' secret formula for how they have found success to defy the NFL's odds of being able to be a successful team, and why I believe that secret formula is why a lot of teams now in the NFL are envious of the Lions' success. Because we have to think about it here. This secret formula that I'm going to talk about in this episode, it has defied all odds from what the outside world in terms of the NFL world has when it comes to looking at the Lions. Because we have to think about it. The Lions, for the longest time, have been held as a team that will never ever figure it out. They've been considered laughingstocks, losers, the whole 9 yards over the last, 20 some odd plus years. And it's hard to even think that not even that long ago, the Lions were considered one of the worst teams in the NFL. They were a team that had virtually no sense of any direction except for down and out. They had decades of incompetent management. It had lackluster interest from their ownership. And let's be honest, all that led to horrible drafting, which all it did was kind of just be like a wash, rinse, repeat cycle. We never seemed to figure it out because we were always doing the exact same damn thing all the damn time. And when you factor that in with terrible free agent acquisitions, a city that was in enormous emotional and economic pain from all the trauma of constant years of ridicule and disappointment, not only in terms of sports, but also from what the rest of the United States was seeing, it was like, dude, we are just stuck in a rut of just perpetual mediocrity. And so you have to think about this. Figuring out this secret formula was huge. So when we start thinking about it, let's go back to freaking Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, just for a brief moment here. Following the disastrous regime of those two clowns, the Lions and their faithful fans once again went to the all too familiar task of trying to find the next leadership tandem. And you have to think about it. Since 2000, the Lions have had 8 official head coaching hires. To put that in perspective, since 2000, there are only 2 other teams that have had more official head coaching hires. Only 2 more. And that's the Raiders with 11 and the Browns with 10. So the Lions have had, since 2000, they've been tied, I think, with a couple of other teams for the 3rd most official head coaching hires, with only the Raiders and Browns having more. That's not exactly a good stat to have on your resume. Now, faith in the franchise with the Detroit Lions, it had completely bottomed out by this point with the whole Patricia nonsense. And you have to think about it. Patricia, what they had done is they had taken a somewhat competitive playoff team, by appearance at least, with, Jim Caldwell, and they had completely mishandled it. They had completely destroyed it from the inside out. And what had happened was Patricia was hired by Bob Quinn because, according to Bob Quinn's own words, and this was the words that is ever infamous from Bob Quinn, was 9-7 was not good enough. That was the reason he justified firing Jim Caldwell, and that was the reason he justified hiring Matt Patricia. Because what was supposed to be this whole point of getting Patricia was to bring in a defensive guru who was going to bring a winning mindset from the New England Patriots and a winning attitude from the Patriots and bring it to the Detroit Lions. However, though, the only thing that Matt Patricia brought was a distrust that was passed on to the players and to the media. He brought a smugness, he brought an abrasiveness, which drove people away. And it caused a very toxic relationship between management and the players, and quite frankly, also the fans and media. Sheila then comes along, and what happens after she fires Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, she gets her brain trust together, which is guys like Barry Sanders, Chris Spielman, she gets Rod Wood in there, and then they start setting out to find their next tandem. They're trying to find their next GM. They're trying to find their next head coach. And they're trying to find somebody that can bring the Lions back from the virtual brink of destruction and out of the pits of hell itself. Now, let's just put it for what it is. That's not an enviable job by any stretch of the imagination. By this point, I don't think there would have been a lot of people that would have actually genuinely wanted the Detroit Lions jobs, whether it was the GM job or it was the head coaching job. And it was a job that for many people outside looking in thought it was an impossible task to try and manage. But the Lions found two very perfect candidates, two very perfect men to find the secret formula that would turn the Lions from the hopeless laughingstocks they had been for the last 2 some odd decades into Super Bowl contenders almost overnight. Now, what is the secret formula? How did Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes transform the most snake-bitten franchise in the NFL's history into not just a competitive team, but a contending team? Well, there's a couple of things we have to take a look at, a couple of key ingredients here. Here's key ingredient number 1. They don't give a damn, they don't care about outside opinions. Neither Campbell or Holmes care about outside opinions. This to me is probably one of the biggest ingredients, one of the biggest things that Holmes and Campbell figured out right away when they came to Detroit. Do not listen to outside voices. Hear them if you want to, just don't listen to them. And what do I mean by this? Well, let's just put it succinctly. The Lions don't give a damn about what analysts' opinions are about their draft picks. They don't give a damn about the media bashing their free agency moves or lack thereof. And they certainly don't give a damn about who disagrees about how they hand out extensions to their players. Holmes and Campbell have said this since the beginning, that we, the fans, had to trust the process. Trust the process, and, we're going to stick to what we know. We're going to stick to what we believe. But the flip side of that coin is that Holmes and Campbell had to also believe in the process. You have to think about this. You have to believe in something before you can actually sell it. If you yourself don't believe in what you're trying to sell, and you're not going to be able to sell it to anybody. Holmes and Campbell firmly believed in what they were doing. So when they were saying you've got to trust the process, it's because they'd already bought into the process. They already believed in their process. They already knew what their process was. They were selling the process to people on the outside and saying, listen, you're going to have to trust us. You're going to have to take us at our word to see what we're about to do here and let the results be the judge for themselves. And the way I look at it is, if you look at what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have done over the last 3 years, by being absolutely committed to the process that they have, by believing in the process that they have not given a damn regardless of what analysts have said, what different people in the community of the NFL have said about the Lions, and specifically about, regardless of whatever the case might be about those two individuals themselves, whether it's Holmes or Campbell. Think about it. Campbell's definitely gotten the much more rougher of the opinions between the two, because Campbell has been called a meathead. He's been called an idiot or a dummy by some people because people just think he doesn't know football. But in fact, he's actually really freaking smart according to his players. It's just like, listen, he's not all about the analytics. He's not all about the strategizing. But when it comes to talking football, Campbell knows what the hell he's talking about. Other things that Campbell has been criticized and has been told about himself from the outside looking in is that he is an extreme gambler. We've heard about this, Campbell's gambles. Again, these are just different kinds of phrases that have been used to kind of put down the Detroit Lions. It's just part of what's happened over the last couple of years. And we've also seen other people that have said stuff about Dan Campbell. Freaking hell, as soon as the man got hired, Stephen A. Smith thought that he should have been fired on the very spot. You go back to the interview. The interview's up on YouTube. That's how I know about this. Go back and you take a look at the introductory press conference and First Take's, reaction to the whole thing. Stephen A. Smith said that Dan Campbell should have been fired on the spot for that press conference. Then you take a look at Brad Holmes. There have been people that have said Brad Holmes wasted picks with Gibbs and Campbell from last year's draft. They said that Holmes was wrong not drafting Goff's replacement. They also said that Holmes had become arrogant from this draft. So again, when you think about it, there have been people that have been making their opinions known about what they think about the job that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have done, and I can guarantee you this, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, they don't give a damn whatsoever. But while they don't give a damn, that does not mean that the Lions don't listen to what is going on outside the building. Oh, sure, they hear what's going on. They definitely hear it because we know that they keep receipts, especially Holmes and especially Goff. Because think about it. There was a press conference, I don't know how long ago it was, but Holmes was asked about his draft picks, and let's just say something. Holmes definitely kept receipts about who said what about his draft picks. Holmes definitely has a memory. And again, we've seen it in the past also as well. I think it was after the Monday night or Sunday night football game against the Packers when Ryan Fitzpatrick called Goff a poor man's Matt Ryan. Both of those guys know how to keep receipts. We haven't seen Dan Campbell do it quite as much yet. Pardon me. But the point of the matter is that they don't listen to what goes on outside the building, but they certainly hear it. And the point is that the Lions have developed an attitude that they believe in their process and they're going to stick to it and remain steadfast to it, whether it's the players, whether it's the management, or even the ownership. Because again, we've also seen the ownership step up and say, listen, I don't care what people are saying outside the building. Again, remember when the Lions were like 1-5, 1-6, Sheila gets out in front of the camera, she expressed confidence in Holmes and Campbell, and then boom, right after that, after the Lions started 1-6, what happens? Since that press conference, the Lions have gone 22-8 and accumulated a division crown, 2 playoff wins, and a trip to the conference championship game. That's pretty impressive now, don't you think? So that's ingredient number 1. That's point number 1. Ingredient number 2, a common sense approach. Let's just call it for what it is. Over the last, 2 decades, last 20 years, the Lions always followed this belief that they had to get the most intelligent guy to be the head coach or, GM. And as an added bonus, they thought that it had to come from some type of a successful scheme or system so then it could be transplanted to Detroit. The Lions literally did this with virtually every single head coach that they hired before they got to Dan Campbell. Think about it. Marty Mornhinweg. Millen wanted to hire a guy from the 49ers tree to bring in that West Coast style offense. Bring that culture here. He did the exact same thing with Steve Mariucci. Then we get to Rod Marinelli. Rod Marinelli was considered one of the best defensive-minded head coaches in the NFL at the time when we hired him to be the head coach. Then we get to Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz was considered an up-and-coming defensive guru in the NFL. Then we get to Jim Caldwell. Jim Caldwell was a veteran head coach who had already had a successful bid with the Colts and had a successful culture with them. So then it was like, hey, Jim Caldwell was able to do very well after Dungy retired with the Colts. Let's bring him in. Let's see if we can bring that culture here to Detroit. And then we get to Matt Patricia. And like I've already stated, Bob Quinn was like, hey, let's bring the Patriot culture here to Detroit. The whole point is whether it was the 49ers, whether it was the Colts, whether it was the Patriots, there was always this idea, let's bring somebody else's culture in, let's bring in some really smart individual to lead the team, and that's what's going to get this team up off the ground. But the problem is that the Lions didn't need some genius head coach or strategist like head coaches like, Bill Walsh or Joe Gibbs. The issue was that the Lions are not a culture that's about being book smart necessarily. We're more about being street smart, common sense smart. And that's what Holmes and Campbell bring. And you have to also think about it. Like I've said in the past, I'll say it again here. The culture has to be indigenous to Detroit. We are not going to take somebody else's culture, transplant it here, and call it our own. We are all about being true to our roots here in Detroit. We're blue collar. We are not going to take somebody else's culture and call it our own. It has to be ours. That's the way it has to be. And that's what Campbell and Holmes recognized. Think about it. Campbell is the perfect embodiment of Detroit. He's a hardworking guy, he's gritty, he's tough, and he's got a common sense, down-to-earth, kind of no-nonsense kind of guy. Campbell reflects this attitude in his coaching style by not talking down to players, but by talking to and with them. He's more about, hey, I'm going to treat you like individuals that are on the same level as me. I'm going to treat you like men. And that ability to have that, to understand that being not only a former player himself when he's talking to his players, I believe is one of the biggest reasons that the players have a love for playing for him and how he can relate and communicate to them on their terms because he's been there himself. Now, when you take a look at Holmes, he also embodies this, but he does it a little bit more with a bit of a suave kind of personality, a little bit more of a smooth kind of personality. But the most basic sense possible, I'm just going to put it like this. he looked at this whole concept of rebuilding the roster, and he was like, listen, I'm not going to try and outdo myself. I'm not going to try and outsmart myself here. I'm going to look at the most basic way. I'm going to look at the best way possible to, fix the roster in the most practical way possible. Holmes has repeatedly passed on guys in the past that were bigger name free agents or guys in the draft that were bigger name draft picks, and he went after guys that might have been considered lesser quality players that people would have thought, hey, those are guys that are just temporary fill-in players, or they're not guys that are considered all that good. But think about it. He's held on to those players rather than replacing them with guys that are supposedly of much better quality talent. That's just what, again, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are all about. The best way I can describe Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell's mindset is this, and it's a phrase I've heard multiple times before, but it fits perfectly with what the Lions are about right now. And it's this. Again, the Lions value a scheme. They value a culture where it kind of goes like this. How do I put this? It's that hard work beats talent when talent won't work hard. That is the whole mindset right there. It's like, listen, we want talented players, but we want guys that are going to work hard first and foremost. And if they're talented on top of that, now we're sitting pretty. But you have to be willing to work hard first and foremost. And that's a reason why I think the Lions have had such a major turnaround as expediently as they've had. So that's ingredient number 2. Ingredient number 3, transparency, integrity. Whoo, this one's a big one. Regardless of the thoughts on the matter, this ingredient of the formula is partly done to counter the previous regime of Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. Because let's just be fair and honest here. Under Patricia and Quinn, trying to get any sort of damn information on the team was like trying to pull teeth from a horse. You were most likely going to get kicked in the you-know-what trying to get information because the Lions were not giving out information. And that was because Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn treated everything about their football operations like it was a damn secret, and they treated everybody like they were trying to steal that information, and everything was need to know. And since we weren't a part of the organization, we did not need to know. This not only spawned distrust from the media and fans, but it also caused a lot of misinformation on what may or may not be going on with the organization. The only guaranteed thing that we did find out was this, that if you had a beef with the regime, you were going to be gone, a.k.a. Quandre Diggs or Darius Slay. And that if you were to say no, and this was the other thing we found out, is that that Patricia were never ever going to say no to an ex-Patriots player. If there was an ex-Patriots player out there, chances are the next phone call they were going to be getting was to come and play for us. Now, the stark contrast between Holmes and Campbell on this is absolutely massive, and it's refreshing because you have to seriously look at the difference here. In the 3 years that the Lions have been under Holmes and Campbell, the transparency has been absolutely remarkable. We've had access through Hard Knocks. We've had open communication on the Lions' intentions for player retention and roster building. They've been honest about their thoughts and opinions in regards to, players and the accountability for failure. These are all things that Patricia and Quinn never ever even once thought about doing. It was a completely foreign concept to them. So for me, when you think about it, this again shows also the difference between Patricia and Quinn versus Holmes and Campbell. With Patricia and Quinn, it was kind of like they were like, oh, well, we're too smart for you guys. We're smug about the way we are because, hey, we're from the Patriots. We know what it's like to win. You guys don't. Holmes and Campbell aren't like that. They're like, listen, we're going to lay it out there for everybody. We want everybody to know what we're going to do without necessarily giving you guys a roadmap. The whole point of the matter is that, again, It's not like the Lions with Holmes and Campbell haven't had to go through their own gauntlet. They have. But they didn't shut everything down and say, listen, we're not going to tell you guys what we're trying to do. It's not like that, the Lions under Holmes and Campbell didn't go through, like I said, their own trial by fire. They didn't get their criticism from the media or the fans. They certainly did. But the difference was when Holmes and Campbell got criticized, they took accountability for what was going on. When Patricia or Quinn got criticized, they either got combative, they got evasive, or they just showed that they couldn't handle the criticism because they didn't want to handle the criticism. Point is, in all ways, Holmes and Campbell have demonstrated that by being open and honest, it has bred a culture of trust and respect that has been huge, not only for the team, but also for the media and the fans that follow the team. Now there's the final one, I believe. Maybe? I think I got one more after this. I'm going to just check. Nope, this is the last one. Just making sure here. So we have the final ingredient. So this is the fourth ingredient. Family, brotherhood. To anyone who has ever played football, most of us have very fond memories of when we played in middle school or high school. It might have been called something else depending upon where you went, but that's what it was called by me, middle and high school, and then you get to college. But typically, one thing that is usually similar between all of those levels is that there is a sense of family, or maybe better put, a sense of brotherhood between your teammates. This particular ingredient, I believe, is one that solely comes, and that comes from the head coach. You either have it or you don't have it, and it's because of the head coach. The head coach is typically the guy that is going to be the one that gets the players to kind of, be part of that brotherhood. Usually the good head coaches, they'll treat their players with great respect. They'll treat them as men. They'll treat them as equal. The bad head coaches will do typically the very opposite of this. And usually what happens is it causes a divide in the teams. And this is a huge difference in the approach between Campbell and Patricia. Again, Campbell has extremely high respect for the players, and he loves his players. Patricia, on the other hand, he often appeared very, distant. He appeared to not be very close to the players, and he showed to be way too analytical and distant with the players. And it was often found that, later on, that he was extremely disrespectful to players, aka Darius Slay, in some meetings. So you have to think about it. You also take a look at how the players themselves have reacted differently between Patricia when he was here versus when Campbell was here. When Patricia was here, you never saw players smiling. You never saw players laughing. You never saw players ever say, oh, this is fun. We enjoy doing this. There was not really much of a sense of camaraderie when Patricia was around because it was all about business. It was all about being dead serious. And Patricia was a freaking authoritarian with an iron grip over the entire team. And some of the players absolutely resented it greatly. They did not like the total control. Whereas with Campbell, as soon as he came in, his whole thought process was like, listen, I'm going to treat you guys like men. I'm going to treat you guys like players. I'm going to respect you. And he cherishes the players that are around. We've seen it several times in the past where he's gotten extremely emotional about his players. We saw it back in 2021 where he was crying over the loss against the Ravens because he's like, listen, those guys went out and they gave their all and they still lost. He was very emotional for the players. We've seen times in the past in the training camp sessions where he's like, man, I hate cut day because I hate cutting these players because these are players that he knows have given everything they've given, that they've got, but he still has to cut them. He doesn't want to do that. We've also seen the speech in Hard Knocks where he's like, listen, all I ever think about is you guys. That's all I ever do. That's the kind of guy Dan Campbell is. He is very invested into his players. He loves his players. He respects them greatly. There's a vast difference between how those two men operated, and it's quite plainly obvious the results were for one versus the other. Who was the guy that took better care of his players? It's not even close for debate. So when you think about it, you have to think about it. Campbell understands his players, and because of his understanding of the players, the respect for the players, and the respect they hold for him, that's why the Lions have been able to turn this around. That is an ingredient that, as a great leader of men, Campbell has shown that is a powerful force that when you know how to use it and when you treat it with the respect that it has, you become a force that's almost nearly impossible to stop. But when you take a look at the total conglomeration of ingredients that are for this secret formula, the Lions have now figured out how to become a winning program, become a winning franchise. And this is something that for a lot of teams, they look to try and figure it out. But it takes the right people at the right time with the right personnel. You can't just force this crap. It has to be a perfect set of situational, circumstances that all come together. That's why the Lions now have the ability to win. And when you think about how long the Lions have been considered the laughingstocks of the league, now that the Lions are actually on top, it's kind of got a lot of teams around the NFL envious because it's like, man, this is a team we always could count on to be losers. Now we're looking at them and like, man, they're about to be winners. That right there has a lot of teams envious because it's like now the natural order of what the NFL has been for the last 20 years has gone completely 180. But anyway, I just figured I'd talk about this because I'm always fascinated, I'm always amazed by how things have changed for the Lions, and you have to talk about the biggest people that are in this organization that have facilitated it, which is Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Chris Spielman, and Sheila. But Having said that, I'm going to reach the end of this segment, and I want to say thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past, forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and not had a chance to do so, again, I highly encourage y'all please to subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. But I also want to encourage y'all, please, make sure you also hit that bell notification icon at the bottom of the page, so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. I also encourage y'all, please, to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. And with that being said, to everybody, I just want to say, I hope y'all enjoyed the content. I hope y'all got something that makes you happy. Hope y'all got something that makes you smile. And with that being said, God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the very next episode.